Well, keen observers of this show will know just a few weeks ago I did a feature on energy prices. Why were our bills for electricity, our bills for gas, why were they all going up as much as they were? I focused particularly on one thing in that particular programme, and that was green subsidy. Something that's been hidden from consumers, something that all the political parties don't want to talk about because they all want to go green. And they've been very happy for you, as ordinary people, to pay lots of extra money on your bills so that rich landowners and big companies, nearly all of them foreign big companies, can make vast amounts of profit. So I talked about that. I've also talked in the last few weeks about inflation coming back into our economy in a way that we haven't seen for 40 years. I mean, you've got to be over 50 to even remember what inflation actually is. But since the pandemic began, indeed even before that, governments have created a lot more money. So we have more money chasing the same number of goods. That is part of the reason why we've got inflation. Well, now we have real price inflation in commodities, and in particular, those that we depend upon for our energy, gas being the one that is especially featured at the moment. The price of most forms of gas are up so far this year about 250%. Why is that a problem? Well, I'll tell you why it's a problem. I mean, have a look at that chart. You can see these are very, very big price rises indeed. Well, one of the problems that we've got is that this government has a price cap on gas prices. Now, this was something that Ed Miliband proposed back in the 2015 general election, and the Conservative Party response to it was that that would be communism. Yet, in government, that's exactly what the Conservatives have done. They've introduced a price cap, and guess what? The price of gas is now way through that cap. And so we now have half a dozen energy providers who, if they're buying gas on the spot market now and selling it to you as a customer, are doing so at such a ruinous loss that they're on the verge of going out of business. And so this free market government will no doubt put lots and lots of money into loans to bail out those companies. Believe you me, I have seen in my adult life, in commodities, which I worked in for 20 years, and in currencies, every single time government tries to set a floor of a price or a cap of a price, every single time, with 100% record of failure, it's breached and we have a crisis. This stuff doesn't actually work. Now, for over 20 years, I have been saying, and I've been warning, that the rush to wind energy, the belief that wind energy will solve all of our problems, I've said all the way through these 20 years that it's a very, very dangerous myth. And boy, have we invested in energy. We've invested initially in wind turbines on land, and in doing so, we've despoiled many of the best upland areas in the United Kingdom. Since that time, we've built many of these vast monstrosities out at sea. Now, I wouldn't mind if they'd been built without massive taxpayer subsidy. And I perhaps wouldn't mind if they were a reliable source of energy. And you'll hear at times, you'll hear the chorus of delight. Yesterday, 27% of Britain's energy was provided by wind. Well, isn't that wonderful? But what you never hear from the wind lobby, what you never hear from our politicians, what is hardly ever debated in any form of mainstream media, is the fact that when the wind doesn't blow, they are completely and utterly useless. And for the last few days, we've had very little wind. So when in this country the wind isn't blowing, we then rely firstly on gas to back up that wind power, but secondly, we rely on importing electricity. So we import electricity directly. It comes to us from France, predominantly. We import gas, of course. Some comes from Qatar, some comes in from Norway, although the Russians, who are in a very dominant position in this market, the Russians have not been selling that much gas to Europe over the course of this summer. They've been allowing Europe, Germany in particular, who've made themselves completely dependent on Russia, and they've been giving enough gas for them to survive hand to mouth. This isn't quite yet a 1973 OPEC oil crisis, where the price of oil went up 3.5 times, much to the delight of the Middle East, and in the end, the financial ruin of much of the West with huge inflation. But we find ourselves in a very dependent position. There are other things in energy going on that I find utterly bemusing, such as, in the name of going green, one of the country's biggest sources of energy, biggest producers, is the Drax plant in North Yorkshire. And guess what they burn to produce green energy? Trees. That's right, vast numbers of trees that are cut down in North America, shipped across the Atlantic and burnt in North Yorkshire. So our thinking is all over the place. And when it comes to nuclear, the one form of energy that produces pretty much no carbon dioxide whatsoever. So you would have thought that the Green lobby would embrace it. Well, when it comes to nuclear, we've got ourselves in a complete pickle, because what little renewal there is within nuclear energy is now tied up with the Chinese government, and there are now, unsurprisingly, security concerns. I think what this crisis shows us is, whilst we can never fully protect ourselves against price swings and global events, we ought to aim to be energy independent. Donald Trump did it for the USA, and that in many, many ways took more power, potential power, away from Middle East countries who often have standards we don't like, and Putin's Russia. We are nowhere near that. So what do we need to do? Well, a complete rethink of nuclear energy. We don't need to build the vast monstrosities of the 1950s, 60s and 70s. Rolls-Royce, for example, make very relatively small nuclear units that can produce a lot of reliable energy. Yes, I know we have to deal with nuclear waste. Yes, I know there are things like terrorist threats, but it's one of the things we could do. When it comes to gas, up in Cumbria, we have vast amounts of shale gas. There has been a very successful lobby to say, no, we mustn't frack for gas. It'll cause earthquakes. It'll cause the water to go black. It'll be an environmental disaster. It's been a very successful green lobby against something that we absolutely need to do. And I will say this as well. We're still importing coal, particularly for use in the steel industry. Why import coal when that coal is here in our country? They're all positive, practical steps that I think we can take to make ourselves energy independent. And I really believe this now should become an aim of government. Please tell me what you think by